You could hardly find an academic psychiatrist who is not on the payroll of a drug company. The New England Journal of Medicine, for example, looked for an expert in antidepressant drugs to write a review of antidepressant drugs, and they could not find anyone who qualified as an expert who was not on the payroll of one of the companies making the drugs. I mean, it's like they've bought the field.
I remember being put on the stretcher and taken out. I remember being outside and feeling like, just knowing like, okay, like there's an ambulance and I'm on a stretcher. I was just terrified. And I remember I'm in the ambulance and my parents are in there and I'm just really scared. And I went and got to the hospital and I was examined by the doctor. And then they took me to a place, you know, armed guard, like very dark. I weren't allowed to leave a room. So I was in that place, I don't even really know for how long. And we're sort of coming to, I guess, when I was there and asking my mother, you know, what day it was. And I was really surprised. It was like a week later than I thought it was.
But you know something, I'll tell you, I have a lot of drug reps coming into my office, and they start giving me studies. Now, I'm a big believer in research. I've done a lot of scientific research myself, and I continue. But I very frequently tell them, hey, you know, you sponsored this program. Of course you're going to get good results. And that is the problem with a lot of research in this country. The drug companies, if you figure, take one drug, say a statin drug, it's not only sold in the United States, it's sold all over the world. So if a doctor writes one prescription, that's like an annuity to these drug companies. They have unending amounts of money.
The United States makes up less than 5% of the world's population. But in terms of the world's total bill for prescription drugs, the US makes up about half of it. So the cost of drugs and the number of prescription drugs being consumed by Americans is just through the roof.
The pharmaceutical companies are making money hand over fist. The sicker we are, the more profit for their stockholders.
I just saw an ad the other day that said, well, not enough people are taking statin drugs for heart conditions. But there was no mention of why not change your lifestyle to prevent the condition in the first place. No mention. Or what role nutrients might play in helping lessen elevated cholesterol or elevated blood pressure, because the science shows that you can do that. But it's not being promoted because it's not patentable. It's not profitable. You don't get, what do you get in this? 35 to 40% markup? Take a look at the markup on drugs.
Look at Lipitor. 20 milligrams, $272 what you pay. Their cost $580, 4,500% markup. Then look at the real big one, Prozac. Prozac, 20 milligrams, cost you $247, cost them 11 cents. 224,000% markup. But they're not the worst of them. The worst of them is Xanax. 1 milligram, 1 little milligram. You pay $136, it costs them 2 cents. They make a 569,000% markup.
We've had a 60% improvement in our production efficiency. We have the cost of Glucodox down to 10 cents a pill.
Wow, it looks like Braden Andrews gave us a great deal. Only $12 a pill on Glucodox.
30 tablets of Glucodox comes to a total of $580.
Well, I don't have that kind of money.
Don't you have insurance?
I got laid off.
There are different studies on how many uninsured poor people there are. The numbers range between 49 million and 67 million. It's a big group. And what makes this even worse is that they are, quite frankly, the only ones paying these very high drug prices, twice as high as in Europe and Canada. The rest of us, the rest of us who are fortunate enough to have insurance, we have a pharmacy benefit manager negotiating drug prices. And you know what? Those negotiated prices are the same as in Europe, the same as in Canada. The only ones that pay these very high inflated prices are the poor, the uninsured. So the fight for what the drug companies call a free market is really a fight to charge our poorest the highest price. And that is immoral.
We've been led to believe that we have the finest medicine in the world. The great medical schools, Harvard and Stanford and Columbia and New York University medical schools, that we have the best doctors, nurses, medicines, medical technology. And in some areas, that's certainly true. But what about the other side of the story? I decided to take a look at what is known as iatrogenic disease or disorder, medically induced. And it's frightening.
I didn't know he'd stopped breathing at first. He was a little fussy that morning. And I noticed that he was very still. I noticed he was still. Then in a matter of, I would say, 10 seconds, that inner panic started to hit me. Uh-oh, something's wrong. So I did some mouth-to-mouth, established he still wasn't breathing. I checked the air passages. I was starting to get really scared. And then I think sense kicked in, and I drove like a wild banshee. I put the pedal to the floor. I ran red lights, fishtailed into the emergency room, and I handed the baby over the counter in the emergency room and I said, please make him breathe again. He's not breathing.
Ellen had called me, and I probably got this call somewhere around noon. And I dropped the phone and sped off to the hospital, and all these people were crowded in this room working on our son.
It was a code blue moment and quite hectic. They put the tube down to help breathe. It kept going in his stomach, and when they pumped the bag, he would become distended.
And everyone was frantic, and no one would tell us anything that was going on. Alan was trying to find out what was going on.
They got him resuscitated. Talking to the doctors, they were saying, well, we think it's sepsis. We're going to take him to the bigger hospital, Florida hospital.
And there we sat, and sat, and sat. And then finally, this doctor, Dr. Ben Getz, he came and got us from a waiting room, and he escorted us into this small room and sat us down.
He said, your baby has broken ribs and bleeding on the brain, and he's going to die.
At that point, I immediately lost it, and Ellen was just in absolute shock. You know, do we have the right child here? Are we talking about our kid, our son?
I mean, I seriously thought he had the wrong baby.
And this doctor, it was so strange because he was so cold.
At this time, I can see Francine. She grabbed the rails of her chair. And I'm trying to tell this doctor he's crazy. Oh, you got the wrong baby, blah, blah, blah. And he's saying, no, this is your baby. And we have the x-rays here and this, that, other. We need to know what happened. And at that point, that was about the first air of suspicion that I felt.
Investigators were called in. And they sat and they talked to us.
And they grilled me. The white hot spotlight. Over and over. Did you shake him? No. Did you hurt him? No. Did you hit him? No. Did he drop? No. Did he fall? No. We were there till 2 or 3 in the morning, and they wouldn't let us stay there. We'd come back the next day. Francine had left early to go by herself. I was getting a ride from a neighbor. We stopped at a convenience store, and I was waiting in the car while she had went in to get some food item of some such. And the 2 detectives had come to the front of the car, and they had said, we were looking for you. What are you doing?
It was a setup, basically, is what it was. When Alan pulled up, they pulled up right afterwards. They were waiting. They told Alan to get out of the car, that they were arresting him, something in reference to do with our son. and that they were going to rough him up.